Hey guys, the previous video explained Apple logo history very well. Now, we're going to cover the history of the iOS version. As we know, iPhone devices run on Apple iOS. It is the same operating system as Windows for PC. The idea of introducing a complete screen touch was unique. That's why iOS is a proprietary mobile operating system, the largest app store with millions of apps and games. In this video, you can visit the history of iOS and see how it developed the new versions with the release of iPhones. There are 16 versions of iOS available. The latest version is iOS 16, announced on June 6, 2022. Let's watch the evolution of the Apple iOS system from 2007 to the present. The first iPhone OS 1 was announced at the iPhone keynote on January 9, 2007. It was released on June 29, 2007, with iPhone first generation. This iPhone OS 1 offers iPod music library to create playlists, listen to audiobooks and podcasts, or watch videos. It was easy to use a multi-touch interface to make calls, text, use mail, experience the internet through Safari, check stocks, use web mapping services, weather forecasts, cover flow, visual voicemail, and group chats. This iPhone OS 1 supports first generation of iPhone and iPod Touch devices. The final version was iPhone OS 1.1.5, released on July 15, 2008. This version of support ended in the year 2010. After 1 year, iPhone OS 2 coincided with the release of the iPhone, first generation, 3G, on June 9, 2008. This iPhone OS 2 was compatible with third-party apps. The main thing is that it was the first release to have the App Store and updated iTunes Store with a new icon. In addition, it came out with an improved Maps app for podcast support and provided walking directions for public transit in Maps. The final version was iPhone OS 2.2.1, released on January 27, 2009, and compatible with iPhone first generation, 3G, and iPod Touch, second generation. This version of support ended in the year 2011. Next is iPhone OS 3. Apple released iPhone OS 3 to the public on June 17, 2009. The vital thing is that iPhone OS 3 is compatible with iPad. After this release, iPhone OS was renamed as iOS with the release of the iPad in the year 2010. Talking about features, it supports copy and paste, video recording through a camera app, spotlight search, etc. The final version was iPhone OS 3.2.2, released on August 11, 2010. Unfortunately, this version of support ended in the year 2012. iOS 4 was released on June 21, 2010, with iPhone 4. The main features of iOS 4 are FaceTime, multitasking, iBooks, AirPlay, AirPrint, and personal hotspot. With this OS, iPhone 3G and iPod Touch second generation were supported with limited features. The other supported devices are on screen. The good thing is that iPod Touch users did not have to pay any amount for OS updates. The final version of this version was iOS 4.3.5, released on July 25, 2011. This version of support ended in the year 2013. Apple released iOS 5 to the public on October 12, 2011. This iOS version provides the ability to activate the iPhone wirelessly and use iCloud, Notification Center, and iMessage. The supported devices are on screen. The final version was iOS 5.1.1, released on May 7, 2011. This version of support ended in the year 2014. After iOS 5, Apple released iOS 6 to the public on September 19, 2012, with iPhone 5, iPod Touch 5th generation, and iPad 4th generation. This version introduced features like Do Not Disturb for notifications, Apple Maps on behalf of using Google Sources, a new passbook app that manages a user's boarding passes, loyalty cards, movie tickets, eyes-free, and FaceTime calls over cellular. The final version was iOS 6.1.6, released on February 21, 2014. With some performance issues, Apple dropped support for the iPod Touch 3rd generation and the iPad 1st generation. This version of support ended in the year 2015. Like iOS 6, iOS 7 was designed for user interface. It was released to the public on September 18, 2013, with iPhone 5C and iPhone 5S. It offers features AirDrop, CarPlay, Touch ID, new iTunes radio service, FaceTime audio, and activation lock. The supported devices are on screen. The final version was iOS 7.1.2, released on June 30, 2014. Unfortunately, Apple dropped support for iPhone 4. This version of support ended in the year 2016. Apple released iOS version 8 with a consistent and stable operation returned to the operating system released on September 17, 2014, with iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. Moreover, it became beneficial to the users with UX system modification. It offers features like Apple Music, Apple Pay by taking photos, handoff, iCloud Drive, HomeKit, Metal API, and third-party keyboards. The final version was iOS 8.4.1, released on August 13, 2015. It supports different devices with listed versions. This version of support ended in the year 2016. Apple released iOS 9 to the public on September 16, 2015, with the iPhone 6s, iPhone 6s Plus, and iPad mini 4. This iOS version provides limited support on devices with Apple A5 or A5X processors. Apple added new features like Night Shift, Proactive Intelligence, a new news app, Low Power Mode, 3D Touch on a keyboard, iPad experience improvements, and the public beta program. The final version was iOS 9.3.9, released on July 22, 2019. This version of support ended in the year 2018. iOS 10 was released on September 13, 2016. There was a feature to use one app and access the features of other apps, an expressive messaging app, Raise to Wake, a new lock screen, and improved camera capture. Also, it helps the user to delete built-in apps. The final version was iOS 10.3.4, released on July 22, 2019. iOS 10 supports the following devices. This version of support ended in the year 2019. After iOS 10, iOS 11 was released with improvements for iPhone 8 and iPhone 8 Plus on September 19, 2017. A series of changes to make and run on an iPad-like laptop OS was complicated. This version offered a control center redesign, augmented reality features, iPad enhancements to drag and drop support, and AirPlay 2. It only supports limited devices with the A7 and A8 processors. Apple released iOS 12 on September 17, 2018, with iPhone XS, iPhone XS Max, and iPhone XR. The supported devices are listed on the screen. In addition, it provided limited support on devices with Apple A7 and A8 processors. This version offered features including Siri improvements with Siri shortcuts and multiple step actions, monitor or control device with screen time, group notifications, and Memoji, a personal kind of Animoji. Apple released iOS 13 on September 19, 2019, at its annual Apple Worldwide Developers Conference event. It comes with the iPhone 11 series, 11, 11 Pro, and 11 Pro Max. It has core features like sign in with the Apple User Account System, new privacy and security options, new, improved Siri voice, Google Street View style for Apple Maps, system-wide dark mode, and a QuickType keyboard with Quick Path. Then, iOS 14 came with minor changes to the user interface and features. Apple released iOS 14 and iPadOS 14 on September 16, 2020, with iPad 8th generation and iPad Air 4th generation. This version is compatible with the same set of devices as iOS 13. Talking about features, home screen widgets to choose default apps, users can block tracking online, app library, app clips, picture-in-picture support, pinned messages and emoji search, and built-in language translation for 11 languages. Also, users can access web browser apps with improved privacy controls. The latest key features for iOS 14 are on screen. Like iOS 14, the iOS 15 and iPadOS 15 versions were released at the end of June 2021 with more improvements. All devices that support iOS 13 and iOS 14 also support iOS 15 and iPadOS 15. However, these versions have limited support on devices made with supported chips from A8 to A11 Bionic chips. iOS offers improved features for FaceTime conferencing with SharePlay to watch the video and listen to audio, enhanced mic modes to enhance audio quality, spatial audio for a 3D audio experience, portrait mode to blur the still photo background, cross-platform support, and a Photos app with live text and visual search. Supported devices for iOS 15 are on screen. iOS adds Apple's ongoing privacy policies, such as Apple Privacy Report to know your app's permissions, OnDrive Siri, which fully works on iPhone, and Mail Privacy Protection to block tracking pixels. All iPhone models from the 6S series and the 7th generation iPod Touch are compatible with iOS 15. Apple released the new version known as iOS 16 on June 6, 2022. On the same day, iPadOS 16 was released at its annual WWDC 2022 event. Here, iOS 16 is a successor to iOS 15. On the other hand, iPadOS 16 is the successor to iPadOS 15. This iOS version offers a fantastic haptic keyboard to feel the sweet bliss. Furthermore, the user can remove the image from the background using the Photos app. In addition, Apple added the ability to edit messages or remove embarrassing typos. Also, users can create new lock screen widgets. The final feature is Undo Send Mail, which helps to undo the sending message. The supported devices for iOS 16 are on the screen. iOS 16 dropped support for iPhone models with a 9 and a 10 Fusion chips. This is the first version of iOS that supports iPhones with a 11 Bionic chips or newer chips. Alright guys, that are the history of iOS. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for the latest video updates.